The owners is pretty much kind of stuck in a wall in a corner right now with these players. ESPN has been reporting this thing for the last couple of days. We got several things to go over here. This just came out about 10 minutes ago. It says WNBA CBA negotiations. If another extension is unlikely, what's next? What does status quo mean? And which issues are players focusing on hours ahead of the deadline? The deadline is today, y'all. It's definitely today. Let's head on over to Google, pull up this article, and see what
ESPN has recently released concerning information regarding the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement discussions and what this means for Caitlin Clark alongside all league athletes heading into the 2026 campaign. The situation appears to be moving toward a challenging standstill. A minor development has emerged concerning the CBA talks and the upcoming season. Fans have been anticipating news that an agreement has been finalized, allowing the league to proceed with lottery selections, the annual draft, and the beginning of training sessions so that Clark and other stars can return to action. Unfortunately, this latest information doesn't bring positive news.
Head on over to Google, pull up this article, and see where we at, because it's two articles that we got to go over. So first, we're going to listen to Nafisa Collier. I believe this was yesterday. Let's give it a listen.
I definitely wasn't expecting it to blow up the way that it did. Like, I knew people in our community obviously would see it, but I definitely didn't know that I was going to gain the traction that it did. And sorry, you said, how do I feel now, like a couple months later with our negotiations?
Yeah, and the focus of a lot of that comment was about the leadership. So how are you feeling about the leadership?
Yeah.
Multiple reports require examination to understand the current landscape. Nafisa Collier provided commentary, presumably from the previous day, discussing the unexpected attention her earlier statements received. She expressed surprise at how widely her comments spread beyond the immediate basketball community. Regarding her current feelings about the discussion several months later, particularly concerning leadership, Collier indicated that circumstances remain unchanged since her initial remarks. However, she voiced strong confidence in the Players Association and their internal unity moving forward.
How are you feeling about the leadership?
Yeah, I mean, nothing has changed like since then, but I feel really confident in our PA and where we are with like internally with our players and the future. Just in that the conversation has been had now. Like, people are seeing, I think that change needs to be had. It's coming from so many different directions that so many people feel this way. And I think we're just really excited for the future and what that has to hold, and especially with, all these different leagues popping.
She believes change is necessary and coming from multiple directions, with many sharing similar perspectives. The emergence of alternative leagues like unrivaled and ongoing CBA talks make the future appear promising despite current challenges. Breanna Stewart, serving as vice president of the WNBA Players Association, announced Thursday that neither the league nor the union will consent to another collective bargaining agreement extension before Friday's cutoff. Instead, both entities will transition into what's known as a status quo period. The WNBA and WNBPA had previously accepted 2 extensions for their existing contract, granting 30 days initially, followed by the current extension period.
We're just really excited for the future and what that has to hold, and especially with, all these different leagues popping up, unrivaled, our CBA negotiations. Like, the future just seems so bright. So I feel good about it.
So that was Nafisa Collier, man. Speaking about these negotiations and the update. Now, it goes on to say Breanna Stewart, the vice president of WNBA Players Association, said Thursday that the league and players union will not agree to another collective bargaining agreement extension at Friday's deadline. And then in both parties, what is then
understanding what this status quo period entails and its ramifications for the 2026 campaign requires deeper analysis. ESPN's examination covers these implications along with statements from Stewart and fellow athletes regarding the ongoing discussions. Currently, status quo doesn't signify a work cessation, at least not immediately. During this phase, employment terms from the existing CBA would continue, permitting both league and union to maintain talks. However, since the CBA has lapsed without a successor and the previous agreement prevents either party from initiating work stoppages, the status quo situation creates opportunities for either a player-initiated strike or an owner-initiated lockout.
And then in both parties, what is then would it instead enter a period of status quo. Now, the WNBA and WBPA previously agreed to 2 extensions for a current deal, which gave us 30 days, and the one that we on right now. Now, it goes on to say, what does this status quo period mean? And what are the implications for the 2026 season? ESPN examines both, plus that Stewart and other players are saying about the negotiations. Now, it goes on to say, as of right now,
that time frame proved excellent for WNBA content, generating constant updates about players like Kelsey Mitchell and the Indiana Fever securing major acquisitions. Despite present uncertainties, league insiders believe both parties will ultimately finalize a deal, ensuring a 2026 season occurs. Without these negotiation complications, current discussions would center on free agency matters, topics like Kelsey Mitchell securing her contract, Lexi Hull's compensation, and whether Sophie Cunningham stays or departs. These conversations would normally dominate this period, but CBA negotiations have prevented such discussions from taking place. This represents an extremely difficult and exhausting procedure that has proven challenging to monitor.
Hey, as of right now, what does status quo mean? For one, not a work stoppage, at least not yet. Under the status quo, the working conditions of the current CBA negotiations would be maintained, and the league and union can continue negotiation. But because the CBA expired without a replacement and the agreement prohibits either side from engaging in a work stoppage, status quo opens the door for a strike initiated by the players or a lockout initiated by
fans. Waiting to learn whether their preferred WNBA athletes will return face an agonizing wait. Present indicators suggest movement toward a strike rather than resolution. Additional coverage includes statements from athletes at Unrivaled. Nika Mool provided an ESPN interview yesterday, featured in a piece titled WNBA CBA Q&A, Nika Mool and Nafisa Collier on standstill. This interview occurred last evening. On the eve of discussions for a fresh WNBA collective bargaining agreement, Mool and Collier informed ESPN they feel proud of union solidarity and pledge to continue pursuing a transformational agreement despite frustrations with the procedure.
Status quo opens the door for a strike initiated by the players or a lockout initiated by the owners, which means that this is what it's heading towards. Goes on to say, sources told ESPN that the league has not been contemplating a lockout, but a strike has been considered for players. In mid-December, they voted, which we already covered that, and it goes on to say the longer both sides go without a deal, the greater the likelihood what the league will need to conduct a considered offseason where 2 team expansions draft.
The existing CBA is scheduled to terminate at 11:59 p.m. today, not tomorrow or the following day, but immediately. The WNBPA opted out of the previous agreement back in October. Collier told ESPN they understand their requests, acknowledging some perception that demands are excessive, though players disagree with this characterization. Mool added that the interview underwent editing for length and clarity. ESPN noted that recent months have seen fluctuating information regarding league and player proposals, with figures and details changing regularly.
A considered offseason where 2 team expansions draft, free agency, and college draft all must occur within a few weeks or months. Last offseason, by contrast, an expansion draft was held in early December. Free agency took place January the 11th. To February 1st, which that was a great time period for the WNBA, at least for the content-wise. We was getting updates about Kelsey Mitchell. The Indiana Fever was landing big-time players. But as of right now, despite the uncertainty, league sources believe both sides will.
When asked to describe negotiation status, Collier expressed disappointment they haven't progressed further after approximately 15 months, a remarkably extended period without resolution. Many observers question whether ownership bears sole responsibility, but the reality involves player positions as well. Athletes feel genuinely unified at present, awaiting the league's response while refusing to accept unfavorable terms. They're waiting for the league to address their considered and fair proposal. Mool stated pride in how professional and
give Adam Silver credit for anything, because there's been times he's been a dumpster fire with the NBA. But he recognizes public perception right now is doing what? Switching over into the favor of the owners. All right. All these people have sat back. I've seen comments. People are now very aware of the raises, the financial raises that these players have been offered.
This marks her third CBA involvement, representing 3 distinct eras in her view, with the current period being the most transformational. Yet the advancement achieved, or lack thereof, doesn't align with what athletes have contributed to league growth. Critics note that Caitlin Clark's impact specifically drove much recent growth. Questions remain about how Collier can participate in negotiation discussions while operating unrivaled, a competing league that would potentially benefit from a strike occurring. Another factor possibly contributing to the status quo situation involves the strike vote results.
The financial raises that these players have been offered from the league, and everybody's sitting back, and people are fully aware the league hasn't made any money. And they're like, so you don't want a 9 times raise. You literally, you don't want a salary that increases by that much. That obviously could offer anybody a comfortable living. Never mind the fact that some of these players got endorsements and they're playing in other leagues, blah, blah, blah. Let's be real now. Anybody that's
Not everyone supported striking. 98% voted affirmatively, meaning 2% voted against, which could explain the current direction. The situation remains fluid as both sides continue discussions with the deadline having arrived. Tracking these developments will be essential for understanding when and how the 2026 season might proceed. The WNBA collective bargaining agreement deadline arrived on January 9th, marking a critical juncture in negotiations between the players' union and the league ownership, which is predominantly controlled by NBA stakeholders. Adam Silver has become increasingly vocal throughout this process, and despite previous controversies surrounding his NBA leadership, he appears to understand that public sentiment is currently shifting toward the ownership side.
Other leagues, blah, blah, blah. Let's be real now. Anybody that's playing women's basketball, even an average player at this point, probably can make $1.5 million a year. We don't want to hear that this ain't enough money. Now, obviously, I'm talking about you combine it with Unrivaled or you combine it with Project B, whatever. But under this new system, you're talking about $780,000 for an average player, and then, I don't know, go to Project B and probably make another $2 million. Hell, some of these players really and truly may end up making $3 million a year.
Public awareness has grown significantly regarding the substantial compensation increases being proposed to players by the league. Many observers are questioning why athletes would reject offers that represent a 9-fold increase in pay, particularly when the league has yet to generate profits. The proposed financial package would provide what most would consider comfortable earnings, especially when combined with endorsement deals and opportunities in other basketball leagues. Current players in women's basketball, even those of average skill level, could potentially earn approximately $1.5 million annually when factoring in multiple revenue streams. When combining the proposed WNBA salaries with opportunities from Unrivaled and other ventures, average players could receive around $780,000 from the WNBA alone, with potential additional earnings reaching $2 million or more from alternative leagues.
$3 million a year, and they may be able to combine the WNBA and Project B and make just make a baseline $4 or $5 million. Come on, that's plenty. That's plenty for a league that's never made any money. Come on, you got to be reasonable. WNBA's collective bargaining agreement with players expires at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Friday. So actually, it hasn't come and gone. They got until tonight, right?
Top-tier athletes might accumulate total annual compensation between $3 to $5 million across all basketball activities. The collective bargaining agreement was set to expire at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. Despite the approaching deadline, both parties appeared far from reaching consensus, with indications suggesting no agreement would be finalized. The league is preparing for a potential work stoppage initiated by players. Considering a strike under current circumstances could prove damaging to the players' public image.
Tonight, right before midnight. It might as well have come and gone. The way they're talking, they're basically saying it's a wrap and a deal won't be done. And the league is bracing for the possibility of eventual player strike. And it's crazy because these players are considering a strike right now. You want to talk about looking horrible publicly? Boy, you're going to look terrible.
The WNBA and the Players Association remain divided on fundamental issues, with revenue distribution serving as the primary obstacle. This split determines compensation levels, and both parties acknowledge that salaries must increase substantially. League representatives stated their commitment to negotiating honestly with the objective of finalizing an agreement promptly. Their priority involves reaching terms that dramatically enhance player earnings while protecting the business's future viability. However, league officials declined to release specific revenue data for 2025.
Boy, you're going to look terrible. The WNBA and the Players Association remain far apart on the deal. The key sticky point at the center of negotiation is how the league and the players share revenue. That split dictates the size of players' salaries, which both sides agreed need to significantly rise. It goes on to talk about the revenue sharing split. I'm not going over these numbers again. Quote, the WNBA continues to negotiate in good faith.
Breanna Stewart previously addressed these negotiations publicly. The expiration of the deadline would initiate a status quo period, during which the existing CBA would continue until either a fresh agreement emerges or negotiations cease entirely. Given the substantial gap between positions, the Players Association announced on December 18 that membership had voted decisively to authorize strike action when deemed appropriate. This authorization could technically take effect immediately, though Stewart indicated on Thursday that the union would maintain good faith negotiations. Striking remains an option being held in reserve rather than an immediate action.
Quote, the WNBA continues to negotiate in good faith with the goal of reaching a deal as soon as possible. Our focus remains on reaching an agreement that significantly increases player compensation while ensuring long-term growth of the business, said a WNBA spokesperson in a statement. The spokesperson declined to provide specific league revenue figures for 2025. Now, Breanna Stewart came out and made comments about this. I didn't make a video yesterday because I covered it the day before yesterday. The comment she made in a video on a clip. The passing of the deadline will trigger a period of status quo in which the current CBA remains in place until either the league or the union reach a new deal or one side halts negotiations. Given the significant difference in ask, the WNBPA announced on December 18th that its members have voted overwhelmingly to authorize a strike when necessary.